There are nights when silence becomes heavier than words, when your heart feels too tired to pray and you start wondering if God still listens. You look around and everything seems to be falling apart. Dreams delayed, prayers unanswered, peace slipping away. But deep inside that silence, God is still speaking. His promises were never written for calm days. They were carved for storms like these. Every word he spoke is a lifeline thrown into the middle of chaos, pulling your heart back to faith. You see, faith is not pretending everything is fine. Faith is standing in the dark and whispering, "I trust you, Lord." Because when the world tells you it's over, his word declares it's just the beginning. The Bible is not a collection of old stories. It's a living voice that crosses centuries to reach you today. And within it, God left 10 promises, not as decoration, but as anchors for your soul. So, take a breath. Whatever you are facing, there are divine words written with your name on them. These promises are not just to read, but to live, to breathe, to hold when everything else slips through your hands. They are proof that heaven still watches over you, even when your world seems silent. Before we move to the first promise, remember this. When the storm seems endless, that's when God begins to reveal his eternal faithfulness. Because his voice still whispers the same truth it did thousands of years ago, "I will never leave you nor forsake you." Loneliness is one of the deepest wounds of the soul. It doesn't matter how many people surround you. There are moments when you still feel invisible, unheard, unseen. The world can be noisy, yet inside there is a silence that echoes. It is in that silence that God speaks the most tender words ever spoken to humanity. "I am with you always." Not sometimes, not only when you deserve it, always. That single sentence carries enough power to rebuild a life. It means you were never meant to walk alone. When Jesus spoke those words in Matthew chapter 28, verse 20, he wasn't promising a quick escape from pain. He was promising his presence in the middle of it. He knew the path of human fear, the weight of tears, the sting of abandonment, and yet he left us with a certainty that cuts through every dark thought. Wherever you are, he is there too. You may not see him, but his presence fills the space between your heartbeats. When the weight of life presses you down, it's his invisible hand that keeps you from falling apart. Think about it. The God who created galaxies walks beside you through ordinary days. The same one who commands the stars also sits quietly beside you when you cry alone in your room. You don't need to chase his presence. It's already where you are. Every breath you take is a reminder that he never left. Sometimes his silence is not absence, it's intimacy. He is closer than the pain, closer than the fear, closer than the shame you try to hide. This promise changes everything. You can lose things, people, opportunities, but you will never lose him. When you're surrounded by uncertainty, his presence becomes your stability. When others abandon you, his faithfulness becomes your comfort. When anxiety whispers that you're on your own, his word cuts through the noise saying, "You are not alone." That's not poetry. That's divine truth. Every sunrise you see is another whisper of that promise, proof that the God who began the day will walk through it with you. Maybe you've asked, where is God in this situation? The answer is not in the distance, but in the nearness. He's not standing at the end of the road waiting for you to arrive. He's walking beside you on every uneven step. He's in the hospital room where tears fall quietly. He's in the empty kitchen where you eat alone. He's in the long nights when you scroll through memories wondering how it all went wrong. He's in the laughter of your children, in the warmth of sunlight, in the peace that somehow visits you when you least expect it. His presence is not a feeling to be chased, but a truth to be believed. The enemy wants you to think that God left because you sinned, because you failed, because you fell short. But the cross stands as eternal evidence that God's presence does not depend on your perfection. It depends on His promise. When Jesus gave His life, He built a bridge that no failure can burn. So even when you run, He follows. When you fall, He kneels beside you. When you break, He rebuilds. Sometimes you might not sense Him, but that doesn't mean He's gone. When a teacher gives a test, they stay silent, but they're still in the room. The same is true with God. His silence doesn't mean absence. It means trust. He's watching, guiding, and waiting for your faith to remember what your emotions forget, that He never leaves. So when fear tries to convince you that you're forgotten, speak this truth aloud. God is here. Say it when your heart feels empty, when your mind feels heavy, when your prayers feel unanswered. Declare it like a shield, because every time you remind your soul of His presence, darkness loses ground. You may not see Him working, but He is rearranging the unseen so that everything aligns for your good. God's presence does not always remove the storm, but it calms the sailor. He might not stop the waves, but He will keep your boat from sinking. Remember how He was with Daniel in the lion's den, with Joseph in the prison, with the 3 young men in the furnace. His pattern has never changed. He doesn't promise to keep you from the fire. He promises to walk with you through it. The flames may rise, but His presence makes them powerless to destroy you. And when you finally reach the other side, you'll realize something profound. What sustained you was not your strength, but His nearness. You'll look back at the darkest moments and see footprints beside yours. You'll understand that the tears you thought fell alone were seen, counted, and carried by the one who never left your side. That's the beauty of this promise. It's not conditional, it's eternal. Wherever you go, from the valley to the mountain, from sorrow to joy, His presence goes before you, beside you, and within you. When the world turns its back, He leans closer. When hope fades, He whispers it back into existence. And when the night seems endless, His presence becomes the light that refuses to die out. So today, don't wait for your life to be perfect before you believe He's there. Feel the sacredness of this moment. The space you occupy right now is holy because God stands in it with you. His promise still echoes through every heartbeat, every breath, every second. I am with you always. There comes a point when your strength runs out. You've tried to hold everything together, to stay calm, to believe that things will get better, but your heart feels heavy and your hands are tired. You start wondering how long you can keep pretending to be strong. It's in that breaking point that God begins to reveal His secret. Real strength doesn't come from you, it comes from Him. When Paul wrote in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9, that God's power is made perfect in weakness, he wasn't writing theory. He was writing truth born from pain. He had begged for relief. He had pleaded for God to take away the thorn that wounded him daily. But instead of removing it, God replied, "My grace is sufficient for you." That was not a denial. It was an awakening. God's strength doesn't replace yours. It transforms it. He doesn't wait for you to be flawless before He fills you. He meets you exactly where you fall. In His kingdom, weakness is not a flaw, it's an invitation. When you stop pretending you can carry everything alone, that's when His power steps in. He never asked you to be invincible. He asked you to be honest. There is beauty in admitting that you're tired, because it opens space for the Holy Spirit to breathe new life into what exhaustion tried to kill. We often measure strength by control, by how calm we look when everything falls apart. But heaven measures strength differently. God calls strong the one who keeps believing while breaking, the one who prays with trembling hands, the one who stands up again after every failure. Strength, in God's eyes, is not the absence of tears. It's the courage to keep trusting while you wipe them away. When life feels like a battle you can't win, remember David. He didn't face Goliath with armor. He faced him with faith. His confidence didn't come from skill or size, but from the unshakable knowledge that God was with him. The same God who strengthened David stands with you now. When you have no energy left to fight, let His Spirit fight through you. Your part is not to win every battle, but to stay in His presence long enough for His power to take over. There's a reason why God allows weakness. It humbles us, softens us, reminds us that we were never meant to be self-sufficient. Every time you reach your limit, you touch the beginning of His. You may feel broken, but He sees you as ready. You may feel empty, but He sees space for His glory. What looks like failure to you may be preparation to Him. Because the moment you surrender your pride and say, "Lord, I can't do this without you," heaven leans in and whispers, "Now you're strong." This promise of strength is not just for extraordinary moments. It's for the ordinary ones, the mornings when you don't want to get out of bed, the long hours at work that drain you, the arguments that steal your peace, the disappointments that make you question your worth. In those small, daily deaths of the soul, God's power begins to pulse quietly within you. He turns sighs into prayers, weakness into worship, and defeat into testimony. You may think you've fallen too far, but God's strength reaches deeper than your lowest point. The valley is not where you're buried. It's where His roots grow strongest in you. Every time you feel too weak to stand, remember this. The same power that raised Jesus from the dead lives in you. That's not symbolic, that's reality. The same resurrection strength flows through your spirit, not to make you immune to pain, but to make you unbreakable through it. Maybe right now you're thinking, "But I can't anymore." That's exactly where He wants you. Because when you can't, He can. When your words stop, His Spirit intercedes. When your vision blurs, His guidance becomes clear. Your weakness is not the end of your faith, it's the beginning of His miracle. He's not disappointed by your limits. He designed them so you would never live apart from His power. The world tells you to be strong by pretending you're fine, but God tells you to be strong by admitting you're not. The world says power comes from control. God says it comes from surrender. The world tells you to fight harder. God tells you to rest deeper. That's why His strength feels different. It doesn't always lift the burden, but it gives you endurance to carry it with grace. You won't always feel powerful, but you'll notice that somehow, even with tears in your eyes, you keep moving forward. That's not you, that's Him. In your weakness, God doesn't see a failure. He sees a vessel He can use. The cracks in your heart are not signs of defeat. They are openings where His light gets in. You don't need to understand how it works. You just need to believe that it does. When everything else collapses, you'll discover that the foundation of His strength cannot be shaken. You'll look back on what tried to break you and realize it became the very thing that built you. So stop measuring your worth by how strong you feel. God doesn't choose the strongest, He strengthens the chosen. And if you are listening to these words right now, it's because He is reminding you that your story isn't ending in weakness, it's beginning in power. Let His promise settle deep within you. His grace is enough. His presence is enough. His strength is enough. You don't have to carry what only He can sustain. When your knees give way, let them fall in prayer. When your heart trembles, let it tremble in His hands. And when you have nothing left to give, whisper His name, because that name alone has enough power to lift you again. His promise still stands. unshaken by your exhaustion, untouched by your doubt. My power is made perfect in weakness. There are storms that no one sees. You smile in front of others, but inside your mind, waves are crashing. You try to look composed, but your heart beats fast, your thoughts don't stop, and sleep becomes a stranger. You long for peace, but the world only teaches distraction. It tells you to run, to buy, to pretend, to hide. Yet every escape leaves you emptier than before. Then, in the middle of that chaos comes the voice of Jesus saying in John chapter 14, verse 27, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. I do not give to you as the world gives." These words are not poetic comfort, they are spiritual reality. His peace is not fragile like the world's. It does not depend on silence outside. It begins with calm inside. The peace Jesus offers is not the absence of problems, but the presence of His power within them. When He says, "Do not let your heart be troubled," He's not denying the storm. He's giving authority over it. That's what makes divine peace different. The world's peace depends on control. God's peace flows from surrender. You can be surrounded by chaos and still have a stillness that nothing can shake. That's the peace He gives, the kind that guards your heart and mind like a fortress. When Jesus slept in the boat during the storm, His disciples panicked, but He remained calm. Why? Because peace doesn't come from the absence of wind, it comes from trust in the one who commands it. That same Jesus is with you. While you panic over what you cannot fix, He rests in complete control. His calm is not ignorance, it's sovereignty. He doesn't need the sea to be calm before He gives you peace. He gives you peace so you can face the sea differently. Many people try to earn peace through effort, through perfection, through pleasing everyone. But peace cannot be earned. It must be received. It's a gift, not a reward. That's why He said, "My peace I give to you." You don't deserve it. You don't buy it. You simply receive it. The secret is learning to stop fighting for control and start resting in His will. Because the moment you release what you can't change, His peace starts filling the space where anxiety once lived. Peace is not a destination. It's a person. When you walk with Christ, peace walks with you. Even in tears, even in fear, even in waiting, His presence becomes a steady rhythm that keeps your heart anchored. You might still hear the wind, but it no longer owns you. You might still feel the weight of uncertainty, but you no longer carry it alone. That's the miracle of His peace. It doesn't remove your humanity. It redeems it. The peace of God surpasses understanding because it works where logic fails. It's what makes a grieving mother still trust. It's what makes a man in despair still hope. It's what allows you to forgive someone who hurt you deeply. It's not natural, it's supernatural. That's why the world can't explain it or replicate it. It can give distraction, it can offer pleasure, but it cannot give the stillness that comes from the throne of heaven. That peace is unshakable because it's built on eternal truth. When you invite that peace into your heart, fear begins to lose its voice. Worry becomes weaker. You start seeing life differently, not through panic, but through perspective. The same circumstances remain, but your soul is no longer a battlefield. You begin to rest. Not because everything is perfect, but because you trust the one who is perfecting everything. This is the transformation that faith brings. It changes storms into classrooms, pain into prayer, waiting into worship. And if right now you're wondering how to find that peace, start here. Silence the noise and listen. Peace doesn't shout, it whispers. It comes when you open the scriptures instead of the endless scroll, when you pray instead of panic, when you thank instead of complain. It grows when you stop asking why and start saying, "Even so, I trust you." The peace of God doesn't mean you won't cry, it means you'll cry with hope. It doesn't mean you won't struggle, it means you'll struggle with strength. You might not feel peaceful every day, but the more you dwell in His presence, the more His peace dwells in you. The world changes, people change, emotions change, but His word never does. Every promise of peace is backed by the authority of heaven. When He says, "I give," it's already yours. The only question is whether you will let it in. Let His peace rewrite the way you think, speak, and live. Let it turn fear into faith and chaos into clarity. And when darkness tries to return, remind your heart, I have His peace. Not the fragile calm of a world that breaks easily, but the solid assurance that the Prince of Peace Himself lives within you. Every moment you choose trust over fear, gratitude over worry, prayer over panic, His peace expands its borders inside you. So if today your mind feels like a battlefield, remember this truth. His peace is stronger than your storm. You don't have to understand it to receive it. You just have to surrender to it. Because the one who calmed the sea is still speaking. And His words haven't changed. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. There are seasons when life feels like it's slowly draining the light out of you. You wake up tired, move through the day in silence, and end it wondering when the heaviness will lift. You try to smile, but even joy feels distant. It's not that you've lost faith, it's that you've run out of strength. You've been strong for too long, carrying things that were never yours to carry alone. And in moments like these, God doesn't scold you for being tired. He calls you to rest, not in passivity, but in trust. In Isaiah chapter 40, verse 31, He promises, "Those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint." This is not just encouragement, it's divine strategy. Renewal doesn't come from escaping life. It comes from waiting on God in the middle of it. Waiting is not inactivity. It's the highest form of faith. It means you believe that even when nothing seems to move, God is working behind the curtain. He is not ignoring your exhaustion. He's preparing your renewal. Every delay in your timeline is alignment in His. While you see silence, heaven sees construction. He's rebuilding what you thought was finished, restoring what you thought was lost, and strengthening what you thought was broken beyond repair. Think about the eagle in that verse. It doesn't escape storms, it uses them. When the wind rises, the eagle doesn't fight it. It spreads its wings and lets the same storm that could destroy others lift it higher. That's the image of faith. God doesn't always calm the storm around you. He gives you new wings within it. He renews your strength so that what once threatened to break you becomes the very wind that elevates you. Renewal is not about returning to who you were. It's about becoming who you were meant to be. There's a difference between being busy and being fruitful. Busyness drains, faith restores. The world tells you to keep moving, to hustle, to fix everything on your own. But the kingdom of God works differently. Renewal comes when you stop striving and start trusting. When you surrender your exhaustion at His feet, you create room for His power to fill you again. You cannot receive new strength with clenched fists. You must open your hands. Sometimes renewal comes quietly, not through sudden miracles, but through subtle grace. One morning you wake up and realize the weight feels lighter. The tears no longer sting the same way. The things that once broke you don't control you anymore. That's how God renews, slowly, faithfully, perfectly. You might not notice it at first, but while you rest in Him, He rebuilds you piece by piece. It's easy to think that hope is something you feel, but true hope is something you choose. You choose it when your eyes are tired of crying, when prayers seem unanswered, when faith feels like an echo. You choose it because you know that God has never failed to finish what He started. Hope is not denial of reality, it's trust in God's sovereignty. When you place your hope in Him, you stop relying on your own strength, and that's where renewal begins. Renewal is not just about energy, it's about perspective. God renews your strength by renewing your vision. You start to see your problems not as punishment, but as preparation. The things that tired you before now train you. The pain that weakened you now sharpens your faith. Renewal changes your posture. You stop surviving and start soaring. If you feel weary today, remember that weariness is not a sign of weak faith. It's a sign you've been fighting too long alone. God doesn't need you to prove endurance. He wants to give you rest. He's not waiting for you to perform better. He's waiting for you to pause and breathe in His presence. When you do, His Spirit begins to move again, reviving what's been paralyzed by exhaustion. This is why Isaiah's words are more than poetry. They are prophecy fulfilled every time a broken soul learns to hope again. God's renewal is not partial. It reaches mind, body, and spirit. He restores clarity where confusion lived, peace where panic ruled, and courage where fear once paralyzed. He doesn't patch up what's broken. He rebuilds from the foundation with materials the world cannot destroy. And if you think you've gone too far or waited too long, listen closely. Your delay doesn't cancel your destiny. Renewal is not about timing. It's about trust. God's pace may not match your expectations, but it always fulfills His promises. Every waiting moment is an act of divine preparation. You are not wasting time when you wait on Him. You are gaining strength for what comes next. The truth is, renewal begins the moment you stop saying, "I can't do this anymore," and start saying, "God, I need you to do this with me." The greatest miracles often start with surrender. When you finally release control, heaven releases power. You don't need to climb your way back to faith. You just need to rest in the one who already carried you this far. And soon, you'll feel it. The quiet strength returning, the peace replacing panic, the hope rising again. The same heart that once felt empty will beat with new life. The same mind that once felt confused will think with clarity. The same spirit that once felt forgotten will sing again. That's the beauty of this promise. God never lets His children stay weary forever. Those who hope in Him always rise again, renewed, restored, and ready to soar. There are moments when life doesn't make sense. You look at your past, at the things that broke you, the doors that closed, the people who walked away, and you ask yourself, why did it have to happen this way? Sometimes it feels like your story is a collection of random pain stitched together by confusion. But God never writes without purpose. What feels like chaos to you is actually order in His hands. Romans chapter 8, verse 28 says, "All things work together for good for those who love God and are called according to His purpose." That means nothing in your life has been wasted. Every heartbreak, every delay, every disappointment was not meant to destroy you. It was meant to define you. Purpose is not always visible in the moment. Often, God hides it inside what hurts the most. The places that made you cry are the same ones that will one day make you strong enough to comfort others. You can't always see it while you're in the middle of the process, but when you look back, you realize every detail had direction. God's plan doesn't skip your pain, it transforms it. Even the seasons that felt unfair were training your faith to endure what comes next. When you think you're lost, you're often being positioned. When it looks like everything is falling apart, it's actually falling into place according to His design. The truth is, purpose rarely feels like purpose when you're living it. It feels like confusion. It feels like silence. It feels like waiting. But that's how God works. He doesn't reveal the full picture because faith grows in the unknown. He allows seasons that make no sense to build a deeper trust that doesn't depend on explanations. You see, trust is not proven when you understand. It's proven when you don't. When you can't see His hand, you learn to trust His heart. That's where true faith lives. Joseph in the Old Testament could have given up 1,000 times. Sold by his brothers, falsely accused, forgotten in prison. His life looked like a series of injustices. But years later, when he stood as ruler over Egypt, he saw what God had been building all along. What others meant for evil, God used for good. His suffering became the road to his destiny. That same pattern runs through every believer's story. The pain that once confused you will become the platform God uses to speak through you. God doesn't waste wounds. He uses them to birth compassion, to deepen your empathy, to shape your mission. The very thing that broke you might become the reason someone else finds healing. That's how redemption works. The cross looked like defeat, yet it became the greatest victory in history. If God could turn the darkest moment of all time into salvation, imagine what He can do with your story. When you surrender your need to understand, you begin to see glimpses of His purpose even in the hard places. You realize that what you lost made space for what's coming, that the silence prepared you to listen, that the pain trained you to love deeper. God never allows anything in your life that He won't later use for your good. He's not only the author of your story, He's the editor who knows exactly where to place every chapter. But this promise isn't a call to passive waiting, it's a call to active trust. It means walking by faith when logic screams for answers. It means believing that even when your plans fail, His never do. It means resting in the truth that no season of your life is meaningless. Even your detours have direction. Even your mistakes can become messages of grace. When you bring your failures to God, He doesn't erase your past, He redeems it. Sometimes what you thought was a dead end is actually a doorway. What you thought was rejection is redirection. What you thought was punishment is preparation. God's purpose isn't fragile. It doesn't collapse when you make a wrong turn. He's the kind of Father who can take every broken piece and rearrange it into something beautiful. Every scar you carry becomes a reminder that grace doesn't erase your story. It rewrites it. Purpose doesn't mean every day will make sense, but it means every day matters. The waiting, the walking, the wondering, they all have value. You may not see it now, but one day you'll look back and realize that every unanswered prayer led you exactly where you were meant to be. The door that closed wasn't rejection, it was protection. The path that ended wasn't failure, it was redirection. God's purpose doesn't always follow your timeline, but it always fulfills His promise. So when you feel lost, remember, you are not off course. You're being guided. You're not forgotten. You're being formed. You're not wandering aimlessly. You're walking through divine design. Nothing is random in the hands of a God who sees everything from beginning to end. Every season has its reason, and even when you can't trace it, you can trust it. Your pain has a purpose, your tears have a story, and your life has meaning beyond what you can see right now. Hold on to this truth. When you walk with God, nothing is wasted. Every moment becomes a brushstroke in the masterpiece he's creating out of your life. There are days when you look at your life and wonder if you'll have enough money, enough strength, enough time. The uncertainty of tomorrow becomes a quiet fear that lives inside your thoughts. You plan, you work, you worry, but peace never seems to last. Yet in Psalm chapter 23, verse 1, David speaks words that silence every fear of lack. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." These words carry an eternal truth. You are not your own provider. God is. You are not walking alone through the field of life. The shepherd walks before you, guiding, protecting, and supplying what you truly need. Provision is more than money. It's everything required to sustain your soul. It's wisdom when you're confused, comfort when you're broken, courage when you're afraid. The shepherd's provision is perfect because he knows what you need before you ask. He doesn't just meet needs, he anticipates them. When David wrote that verse, he wasn't speaking from comfort, he was writing from experience. He had known hunger, betrayal, and danger, yet he still declared, "I shall not want." Why? Because he had learned that God's care doesn't depend on circumstances, it flows from covenant. We often think God's provision means abundance, but sometimes it means sufficiency. Sometimes he doesn't give overflow, he gives just enough to teach trust. The manna that fed Israel in the desert didn't come once a year, it came every morning. They couldn't store it or control it. They had to wake up daily and depend on him. That's the rhythm of divine provision, not luxury, but consistency. He may not give you everything you desire, but he will never fail to give you everything you need. When you try to take control, fear grows. But when you release control, faith grows. Provision begins when trust replaces worry. That's why Jesus said in Matthew chapter 6, verse 26, "Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them." He was reminding us that faith and anxiety cannot share the same heart. If God provides for creatures who never plan a day ahead, how much more will He provide for the children He loves? Provision is not always visible at first. Sometimes it looks like loss. Sometimes the door that closes is the door that protects you. Sometimes the job that ends makes room for the calling that begins. God's provision often hides in disruption. What feels like being stripped away is actually being redirected. The shepherd knows when to lead you beside still waters and when to guide you through valleys. Both are parts of his care. Even in lack, you are being led somewhere sacred. When you live under the care of the shepherd, you stop chasing what was never meant to sustain you. You stop depending on people to do what only God can. You stop measuring your worth by possessions or success. The world says earn, collect, accumulate. But God says trust, rest, receive. His provision doesn't just fill your hands, it fills your heart. He provides peace that money can't buy, favor that effort can't earn, and protection that planning can't guarantee. It's easy to believe in God when you have plenty, but real faith begins when you have nothing left but Him. That's when His provision becomes undeniable. You start to see miracles in ordinary things, the meal that lasted longer than expected, the bill that somehow got paid, the strength that appeared out of nowhere. Those are not coincidences. They are signatures of a faithful shepherd. Every time He provides, He's not just meeting your need, He's reminding you who He is. The shepherd never abandons his flock. He knows when you're weary and when your faith is fragile. He knows how to lead you through seasons of uncertainty without letting you fall. You might not understand his timing, but you can trust his intention. He's not delaying to punish you. He's preparing something greater than you can imagine. The provision you're praying for might already be on its way. You just can't see it yet. And even when his provision doesn't look the way you hoped, it's still good. Sometimes his answer is not yes, but not yet. Sometimes it's not this way, because he's guiding you towards something better. Faith means trusting that even unanswered prayers are being answered differently. The shepherd doesn't give based on your impatience. He gives based on your purpose. So if today you feel empty, anxious, or afraid of tomorrow, remember this. You have a shepherd who never sleeps. He watches over you, not as a distant ruler, but as a loving guide. He knows where the green pastures are, and he knows when to lead you beside still waters. You don't have to chase provision when you walk with the provider. When you trust his care, you begin to live with peace instead of panic. You stop worrying about what you don't have and start seeing how faithful he's already been. The table he prepares for you is not built by your effort, it's built by his grace. And when you finally learn to rest under his care, you'll find that the words of David are not just a verse, but a reality. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. There are memories that visit like shadows, quiet but heavy. You try to move forward, but something inside whispers, "You're not worthy." Guilt becomes a voice that never sleeps. Shame becomes a weight that never lifts. You tell yourself you've changed, yet deep down, you wonder if God truly forgave you or if he still remembers what you did. But listen closely. The same God who formed the heavens spoke in Isaiah chapter 1, verse 18, saying, "Though your sins are scarlet, they shall be white as snow." These words are not a metaphor of hope. They are a declaration of transformation. He doesn't just cover your past, he cleanses it completely. Forgiveness is not something you earn, it's something you receive. Religion might tell you to work harder, to prove yourself worthy, but grace says, "Come as you are." The cross was not built for the righteous, it was built for the broken. Every nail that pierced Jesus' hands was a signature on your freedom. When he said, "It is finished," he didn't mean the story of your failure was over. He meant the story of your redemption had begun. You don't have to keep crucifying yourself for sins he already died for. The problem is that guilt doesn't fade easily. It replays moments, it reopens wounds. But God's forgiveness isn't fragile like human forgiveness. When he forgives, he forgets. Psalm chapter 103 verse 12 says, "As far as the east is from the west, so far has he removed our transgressions from us." That means there is no distance long enough for your past to find you again. What you keep remembering, heaven has already erased. Sometimes the hardest part is forgiving yourself. You may believe that God has forgiven you, yet you still carry the burden as if your regret can pay the price. But forgiveness doesn't mean pretending the past never happened. It means the past no longer defines who you are. You are not your mistakes. You are God's masterpiece in the making. The blood of Christ didn't just cover your sin, it transformed your identity. You went from guilty to redeemed, from lost to found, from condemned to free. Think of the prodigal son. He left home full of pride and returned empty, ashamed, rehearsing an apology. Yet before he could even finish, his father ran to meet him. That's the image of divine forgiveness. It runs faster than your regret. The Father doesn't wait for you to clean yourself up. He meets you in your dirt, wraps you in his arms, and restores what shame tried to destroy. That's how grace works. It interrupts guilt with love. Maybe You've been living as if you need to make up for your past, as if you need to do more to earn peace. But God's forgiveness is not a loan you repay. It's a gift you accept. You don't have to fix what's already been forgiven. You don't have to hide from the one who already knows everything. He's not shocked by your weakness. He's moved by your honesty. Every time you confess, you invite healing. Confession is not about reminding God of your sin. It's about reminding your heart of His mercy. Forgiveness doesn't erase the memory, but it transforms the meaning. The scars remain, but they no longer speak of failure. They speak of freedom. They remind you of what grace can do with a soul that refuses to stay condemned. When the enemy tries to remind you of your past, remind him of the cross. You are not the person who walked away. You are the one who was carried back home. God's forgiveness is not delayed by time or limited by sin. There is no expiration date on grace. Whether your failure was years ago or yesterday, the invitation is the same. Come now, let us reason together. That word now is crucial. It means forgiveness is not waiting for a better version of you. It's available in this very moment. Right here, right now, you can be free. And freedom is exactly what forgiveness gives, not just from punishment, but from shame. You can stop hiding, stop apologizing for your existence, stop replaying the same regret. The blood of Jesus didn't just cleanse your record, it gave you a new name, a new beginning. Forgiveness restores dignity to the soul that sin tried to destroy. You don't have to walk with your head down anymore. You can walk in peace, knowing that heaven sees you as clean. So if you're still haunted by guilt, hear this truth. God is not keeping score. He's keeping promises. His mercy is not measured by your performance, but by His nature. He doesn't forgive because you earned it. He forgives because He is love. And when love forgives, the case is closed. You are free. Lift your eyes, breathe again, and believe it. What was once scarlet is now white as snow. The stains that once defined you are gone. The shame that once chained you is broken. You are forgiven, fully and forever. That's not just a verse, that's a new life. There are seasons when life feels like a maze, where every decision carries weight and every path seems uncertain. You stand at crossroads asking, God, what should I do? The silence can be deafening, and doubt begins to whisper that maybe you've been left to figure things out alone, but that is not who God is. In Psalm chapter 32, verse 8, He declares, I will instruct you and teach you the way you should go. I will guide you with my eye upon you. This isn't a distant promise, it's a personal one. It means the creator of the universe is watching you closely, not as a critic, but as a father leading his child. Guidance from God is not just about direction, it's about relationship. He doesn't hand you a map and send you away. He walks beside you step by step. The problem is that we often want full clarity before we move, while God only gives enough light for the next step. He guides through trust, not through total understanding. That's why faith feels risky. It requires you to move before you see. He doesn't reveal everything at once because His goal isn't just to get you to a destination, it's to teach you dependence. You might think guidance comes through grand signs or supernatural visions, but often it comes in the quiet places, through scripture, through peace in your heart, through wise counsel, or even through closed doors. The same God who parted seas can also guide you through silence. His voice is not always loud, but it is always clear to the heart that listens. The key is not to demand more signs, but to draw nearer to the shepherd. The closer you walk, the clearer His whispers become. Sometimes God's guidance feels like delay, but it's really direction in disguise. When He closes one door, it's because He knows the destination behind it doesn't align with your purpose. What you see as rejection, He calls protection. He sees what you cannot, the hidden traps, the unseen pain, the path that would have led to loss. That's why obedience matters, even when it hurts. God's no is just as loving as His yes. There are moments when His guidance contradicts your logic. He asks you to forgive when you want revenge, to wait when you want to rush, to let go when you want to hold on. That's because His vision extends beyond your moment. You see a small piece of the puzzle. He sees the entire picture. Every time you choose His way over yours, you align your life with His wisdom, and that alignment always leads to peace. Think of Abraham, called to leave everything familiar without knowing where he was going. Think of Moses, guided by a cloud by day and fire by night. Think of the early disciples who followed Jesus without fully understanding His plan. Every one of them had one thing in common: they moved, even when the road was unclear. Because divine guidance doesn't always come with explanation, it comes with assurance. When you can't see the path, trust the one who made it. God's promise to guide you is not limited by your mistakes. You might feel like you took the wrong turn, but grace has a way of redirecting. The shepherd doesn't abandon the sheep that wanders, he goes after it. Even if you made a decision that led to regret, God can still bring you back to the right road. His guidance doesn't end with your detours. It begins again the moment you turn your heart toward Him. But guidance requires listening, and listening requires stillness. You can't hear divine direction in constant noise. That's why Jesus often withdrew to pray. Not because He was lost, but because He valued alignment with the Father's will. If the Son of God needed time in silence to hear, how much more do we? Sometimes the answer you're waiting for is already being spoken, but you've been too busy to hear it. Slow down. Listen. The same voice that spoke galaxies into existence is speaking peace into your confusion. God guides through His Word because His Word never changes. When emotions fluctuate, Scripture stands steady. That's why every decision should pass through His truth. The more you fill your heart with His Word, the easier it becomes to recognize His voice. His Spirit and His Word never contradict each other. One whispers, the other confirms. That's how divine guidance anchors you even when life shifts. There will be seasons where you feel like you're walking blind, but you're not. You're walking by faith, and that's the design. The shepherd's staff may not always be visible, but it's always near. Every step you take in obedience is a declaration of trust that says, God, even if I don't see the way, I know you do. And that trust creates space for miracles. When you surrender your plans, you make room for His. When you stop demanding to know every detail, you begin to experience His peace. The beauty of being guided by God is that even when you make mistakes, He can reroute your path without losing your purpose. You may not end up where you expected, but you'll always end up where you belong. So if you're standing at a crossroads today, unsure which way to go, remember this promise. You are not alone in the decision. The one who led Israel through deserts, who guided kings and prophets, who walked beside fishermen and healed the lost, is the same one leading you now. He doesn't just know the way, He is the way. And when you walk with Him, you'll find that even the uncertain path leads exactly where you were meant to be. There are moments when life hits so hard that all you want is somewhere to hide. You try to stay strong, but the weight of the storm makes you tremble. It could be loss, betrayal, fear, or the uncertainty of tomorrow. The world around you feels unsafe, unpredictable, and loud. And then, in the middle of it all, comes the voice of Psalm chapter 46, verse 1, God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Those words are not meant to be read, they are meant to be lived. They are a promise that when everything else collapses, you still have a place to stand. A refuge is not a place you visit occasionally. It's a place you dwell. It's not an escape from reality, it's protection within it. God never promised that the storms wouldn't come. He promised that they wouldn't destroy you. His refuge is not about removing danger, but about redefining safety. You are safe not because the world is calm, but because His presence surrounds you. When the earth shakes, when the waters roar, when fear tries to grip your heart, the refuge remains. It doesn't crumble, it doesn't move, it doesn't change. There are people who run to temporary shelters, distractions, possessions, achievements, but those walls always fall. They promise comfort, but deliver emptiness. The only true refuge is found in the one who is unshaken. The same God who held David in caves, who protected Daniel among lions, who hid Elijah by a brook, still hides His children today. His protection may not always look physical, but it is always spiritual. He guards your soul in the middle of chaos. Sometimes His refuge is not about stopping the storm, it's about keeping the storm out of your heart. You might still face challenges, but under His covering, they lose the power to destroy you. The fire may come close, but it cannot consume what God surrounds. His presence becomes a fortress of peace, built not with stone, but with His word. That's why the psalmist said later in that same chapter, "Therefore, we will not fear." Because when you know the strength of your refuge, fear loses its authority. There are days when you feel like you're running out of strength, when even your prayers sound tired. But that's when you discover the second part of the promise. He is not only your refuge, but also your strength. He doesn't just give you shelter to rest, He gives you power to rise. You don't have to face life hiding in fear. You can face it standing in confidence. His strength is not something you earn. It's something you receive when you stop trying to fight alone. Imagine a child running into a parent's arms after a frightening storm. The fear doesn't disappear instantly, but safety does. That's what God offers, not distant protection, but intimate refuge. You don't have to knock on His door. It's always open. You don't have to explain your fear. He already understands. Before you even speak, He's already stretching out His arms to hold you. His presence doesn't just comfort, it anchors. When God becomes your refuge, you begin to see life differently. Problems no longer look like threats. They become opportunities to witness His faithfulness. You begin to face storms, not with panic, but with quiet assurance that you are held. That's not denial, that's trust. Faith doesn't ignore reality. It redefines it through the lens of God's promise. You can stand in the middle of what should break you and still say, I am safe. Sometimes His refuge looks like peace you can't explain. Sometimes it's the strength to keep going when everything inside you wants to stop. Sometimes it's the wisdom that arrives right when confusion was about to take over. These are all forms of His protection, subtle, silent, but undeniable. You might not always see walls around you, but you'll feel the calm that comes from knowing you're not alone. Even when trouble multiplies, His protection multiplies faster. When your enemies rise, His shield rises higher. When fear gets louder, His whisper gets stronger. That's why the psalm says He is an ever-present help, not a past help, not a future hope, an ever-present one. He's here right now, in the very breath you take, in the heartbeat that still beats even after heartbreak. You're not surviving by luck, you're surviving by grace. You may not understand why the storm came, but you can be certain of this: it cannot take what God has covered. You are not standing unprotected, you are standing under promise. The same voice that said, "Peace, be still," to the sea is speaking to your life today. The waves will crash, the winds will blow, but the refuge will hold. And as you walk through your days, remember that His strength is not given once, it's renewed continually. You don't have to store courage, you receive it fresh every morning. The world may change, but His protection never will. His walls don't weaken, His arms don't tire, His presence doesn't fade. So when fear tells you that you're alone, answer it with truth: I have a refuge. When exhaustion says you can't go on, answer it with faith: I have strength. Because you do. You have the unshakable promise that the Almighty God Himself is your shelter and your strength, your ever-present help in trouble. And when you live under that truth, you don't just survive storms, you walk through them with peace that nothing in this world can take away. There are wounds that time alone cannot heal, moments lost, relationships broken, opportunities that slipped away. You look back and see years that feel wasted, seasons where pain stole your joy, fear stole your courage, and sin stole your peace. You wonder if those chapters are gone forever, if the damage can ever truly be undone. But then comes God's voice through the prophet Joel in chapter 2, verse 25, saying, I will restore the years that the locusts have eaten. Not just a blessing, not just comfort, a restoration. That means God doesn't just give you what you lost. He gives back what time took. He steps into the ruins of your past and rebuilds them into something greater than before. Restoration is not repair. Repair fixes what is broken. Restoration brings it back to its original beauty, or better. When God restores, He doesn't return things to how they were. He returns them to how they were meant to be. What the enemy used to destroy, God uses to develop. The years that looked empty were not wasted. They were planting seeds of faith, humility, and dependence. He was shaping your heart while you thought He was silent. Every tear that fell was watering something you couldn't yet see. There are seasons that take everything out of you. You give your best, and still it falls apart. You pray, and nothing changes. You wait, and silence answers. But restoration begins the moment you choose to believe that the story isn't over. The God who raised the dead can raise your purpose again. The promise of restoration is not about going back. It's about moving forward with redemption. God doesn't rewind your life. He resurrects it. Think of Job. He lost everything: his health, his wealth, his family. His days turned into nights of grief, his friends into voices of judgment. Yet, in the end, God restored him with double what he had before. But the true restoration wasn't material, it was spiritual. Job learned that even when everything is gone, God remains enough. That's where restoration begins, not when the pain disappears, but when His presence becomes your portion. The locusts in your life may have names: divorce, loss, addiction, betrayal, failure. They devour dreams, time, and confidence, but they cannot devour what God has already declared as His. When He says He will restore, it's not a wish, it's a certainty. Restoration doesn't depend on your effort, it depends on His promise. He can make even your scars shine with purpose. The pain that once haunted you can become the platform from which you speak healing to others. You might feel that too much time has passed, that it's too late to start again. But God doesn't measure by clocks or calendars, He measures by faith. What you think is lost in time, He can resurrect in a moment. He doesn't just give back the years, He gives back the joy those years should have carried. The laughter you thought was gone forever, the peace you thought was unreachable, the hope you thought was dead. He brings it all back in His perfect timing. Restoration often begins quietly. It doesn't always look miraculous at first. It may start with a small shift in your heart, a sense of peace after years of unrest, forgiveness where bitterness once lived, or courage where fear once ruled. That's how God works. He begins restoring within before He restores around. He heals your perception before He changes your circumstances, because true restoration starts with transformation. The enemy wants you to believe that what's broken will stay broken, that what's lost will stay lost. But he's wrong. You serve a God who specializes in impossible recoveries. He can make deserts bloom and turn ashes into beauty. He can take the very thing that hurt you and use it to lift you higher. Every area of devastation in your life is a potential testimony in His hands. When God restores, He doesn't do it halfway. The prodigal son didn't return as a servant. He returned as a son, fully restored, fully embraced. That's the heart of your Father. He doesn't hold your past against you. He holds your future in His hands. You may have wandered far, but restoration brings you home, not to the place you left, but to the place you were destined for. Even the years that seemed wasted have purpose in His plan. The experiences that broke you gave you compassion you couldn't have learned any other way. The silence that frustrated you taught you to listen. The waiting that exhausted you prepared you for what's ahead. God wastes nothing. Every loss is a setup for a greater gain. And when restoration comes, it rarely looks like what you expected, but it always feels like grace. You'll realize that what you wanted to recover was too small compared to what God intended to give. The life you thought was over becomes the foundation for something unshakable. The joy that returns is deeper, the peace more stable, the faith more mature. So if today you feel like too much has been lost, lift your eyes again. The God who promised to restore is still faithful. He has not forgotten a single tear, a single prayer, or a single dream. The locusts may have eaten years, but they did not eat your future. And when His restoration arrives, it won't just heal the damage. It will make you grateful for the journey. Because in the hands of a Redeemer, nothing is ever truly lost. It's only waiting to be restored. There are days when grief feels endless, when you look at the world and wonder how much pain a heart can hold before it breaks. You see injustice, loss, and sorrow in every direction, and it feels like light is slipping further away. You tell yourself to stay strong, but deep down, you crave something that goes beyond comfort. You crave hope. Not temporary hope that fades when circumstances change, but the kind of hope that anchors your soul. Revelation chapter 21 verse 4 gives that hope in the most tender promise ever written. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. This is not a metaphor, it's a future reality. A promise written by the one who cannot lie. Every tear you've cried, every loss you've endured, every ache that words could never express, none of it will be forgotten. God keeps record not to remind you of pain, but to redeem it. There will come a day when sorrow itself will end. A day when death will die, when fear will vanish, and when every unanswered why will finally make sense in the light of eternity. Eternal hope is not just about heaven after life. It's about heaven within life. It's the assurance that your story doesn't end in suffering, It's knowing that every shadow on earth points to a sunrise that cannot be stopped. Hope doesn't deny pain. It declares that pain will not have the final word. You might be surrounded by darkness now, but the light is already written into your destiny. God has promised that one day all things will be made new, and that includes you. Think of the depth of that promise. He will wipe every tear. Not a distant act, but a personal one. The creator of the universe will come close enough to touch your face. He won't delegate comfort. He'll give it himself. The same hands that shaped galaxies will tenderly remove the tears from your eyes. That is not religion. That is relationship. The God who spoke worlds into existence loves you enough to reach for your tears. Eternal hope gives meaning to the temporary pain. It reminds you that what you're carrying is not forever. The illness, the betrayal, the loss, the waiting, all of it is measured against eternity, and eternity always outweighs the pain. You are walking through something temporary towards something everlasting. The road may be hard, but it leads somewhere beautiful. That is what makes hope powerful. It turns endurance into expectation. When Jesus conquered death, he didn't just open the gates of heaven. He opened the possibility of joy that cannot be taken. The empty tomb is proof that endings are not really endings when God is involved. That same resurrection power is what keeps your hope alive today. Because of him, despair is temporary, but victory is eternal. Every believer walks with a quiet certainty. Even if the night lasts a lifetime, morning is coming. You might be asking, but how can I hold on to hope when everything hurts? The answer is not to ignore your pain, but to anchor it. Hope doesn't remove the storm, it holds you through it. When you remember that this world is not the final chapter, suffering loses its sting. The same God who created your soul designed eternity as its true home. You were never meant to find perfect peace in a broken world. You were meant to long for the one who will restore it. Sometimes hope feels distant because we confuse it with optimism. Optimism looks at circumstances and says things might get better. Hope looks at God and says, even if they don't, he's still good. Eternal hope is not built on feelings. It's built on faith in the character of a faithful God. It's the quiet assurance that no pain is wasted, no tear unnoticed, and no season forgotten. When you live with this hope, your perspective changes. You begin to walk differently, pray differently, love differently. You no longer fear endings because you know what awaits beyond them. You no longer despair in suffering because you know it's shaping something eternal inside you. The weight of hope makes you unbreakable because your foundation is heaven itself. And one day, all the promises will meet in one moment, the day when you finally see him face to face. The light you've been chasing will no longer be faith, it will be sight. The questions you carried will dissolve in his presence. The pain that shaped you will be gone forever. You will stand in a place where no tear falls, where no heart aches, where no fear whispers. You'll realize that everything you endured was leading you here to perfect peace, to perfect love, to perfect joy. So while you walk through this temporary world, hold this promise close. Every tear will be wiped away. Not some of them, all of them. The ones you cried in silence, the ones no one saw, the ones you thought would never stop. He knows them all, and he will redeem them all. That's the promise of eternal hope. It's not wishful thinking. It's a guarantee signed with the blood of Christ and sealed by the power of his resurrection. Your pain is not the end of your story. Eternity is. And eternity has already begun in the heart of everyone who believes. So lift your eyes, keep walking. The night is almost over, and soon the voice that created the stars will whisper your name and say, "Welcome home." Every promise we've spoken about, presence, strength, peace, renewal, purpose, provision, forgiveness, guidance, refuge, restoration, and eternal hope, points back to one truth. Promises only matter because the promiser is faithful. Words alone cannot comfort a broken soul. It is the heart behind them that gives them power. And the heart of God has never changed. From the moment He spoke light into existence to this very breath you're taking now, His nature has remained the same, steady, trustworthy, unshakable. You may forget His words, but He never forgets yours. Every whispered prayer, every tear shed in silence, every cry you thought no one heard, He did. His promises are not fragile agreements that depend on your behavior. They are eternal covenants anchored in His character. God doesn't make promises to impress you. He makes them to hold you. When He says, "I am with you," it's not a poetic metaphor. It's a divine reality. The same voice that created galaxies is still speaking over your life today, reminding you that even when everything else shifts, His word stands forever. Faith is not just believing in the promises, it's trusting the promiser when everything else fails. There will be days when you don't feel strong, when your peace disappears, when your prayers seem unanswered. But faith holds on. Not because of proof, but because of the person behind the promise. God's delays are not His denials. What looks like silence is often preparation. What feels like absence is often alignment. The waiting is never empty when God is involved. It's filled with unseen purpose. If you look back, you'll see a pattern. Every time you thought it was over, grace showed up. Every time you felt forgotten, peace arrived quietly. Every time you fell, mercy caught you. The same God who carried you then will carry you now. He has never once broken a promise, and He will not start with you. His faithfulness doesn't depend on how strong your faith is. It depends on who He is. Even when you waver, He remains steady. Even when you doubt, He still delivers. The greatest proof of His promises is not found in what you've received, but in what He already gave, His Son. Jesus is the living promise of God's love. Every word of comfort, every act of forgiveness, every whisper of hope flows from that cross. That is where promises were sealed forever. The same power that raised Him from the dead is now at work in you, sustaining, guiding, and transforming every part of your life. So when you face uncertainty, don't just hold on to the promises, hold on to the promiser. Promises can be read and forgotten, but the promiser walks with you through every valley and every storm. He is the voice in the silence, the light in the darkness, the strength in the weakness. He is the promise made flesh, and as long as He lives, every word He has spoken will come to pass. There will be days when your faith will feel fragile, when you'll wonder if you can keep believing. On those days, don't look at what you've lost. Look at who's holding you. The shepherd who provided for you will not stop now. The Father who forgave you will not change His mind. The Spirit who guided you will not grow silent. The same God who promised to restore and renew will finish what He started in you. Every chapter of your life is proof that God's promises are not just written, they are lived. You are still here because His word sustained you. You are still breathing because His mercy renewed you. You are still hoping because His Spirit whispers that this story is not over. And one day, When you look back from eternity, you will see that every pain had purpose, every delay had design, and every tear was part of a promise fulfilled. You will understand what you can only trust right now, that God was faithful in every detail. Until that day comes, walk in confidence. Speak His word over your life. Trust His timing. Rest in His character. And when fear tries to steal your peace, remember this simple truth. The same hands that hold the universe are the ones holding you. So keep holding on, not because life is easy, but because He is worthy. His promises are not fading, they are unfolding. The story of your life is still being written, and the author is still at work. Every sunrise is another reminder that God keeps His word. You don't have to understand everything to trust Him. You just have to remember who He is. The promiser never fails. He never will.